I can sit here on this podcast and tell you right now that if I could go back in time, I wouldn't be a parent. And some of those things are hard to say because I'm not going to ascribe to the thinking that, like, if I wasn't a parent, my children wouldn't exist. Like, I could go down that rabbit hole and spiral a bit. But if I'm just thinking in isolation in a vacuum about myself solely, I would not do it. But even though I can't go back and change anything, this is a tenet to life in general. You can't go back and change anything. What I can do now is try to find a balance between who I am as a person and make space for all the feelings. And none of that changes the fact that I desperately love my children. And I can feel burdened by them quite frequently, actually, and yet still love them immensely.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, and no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, it's Danielle. My guest today, Holly Murphy, is accomplished in their profession, a devoted parent in love with their kids, a vibrant personality with many facets and layers to them, and they are open about how if they knew what they knew now, back then, they would choose not to become a parent. And I encourage you to hear them out. You might not agree with Holly, but I know they are not the only one. If there's one thing we are on Failing Motherhood, it's honest. And that's why stories like Holly's have a place here. There's nothing more serious than making the commitment to become a parent. We discuss whether or not making the decision to become one involves informed consent. Do you truly know what you're signing up for? And can you? In this conversation, Holly shares their two completely different journeys into parenthood with their two kids, what to do when parenting isn't what you thought it would be, why parenting is so different and so much harder than teaching, and that you can find yourself outside of parenthood and prioritize the person you are outside of the parent role as well. There was so much to cover. We could have talked forever. Here is my conversation with Holly. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I am joined by Holly Murphy. Thank you so much for being here, Holly.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So real quick, just give us, the rundown. Who are you? Who's in your family?
Okay, I have two young sons. They are 6 and 8. So thankfully, we're out of the diaper stage and on to the they want to sign up for everything stage and do all of the sports and activities and somehow find a way to pack my schedule. So I spend a lot of time with my two children. And then outside of my family, I also work in education. So I am a curriculum administrator for a public high school here in my city, as well as a doctoral student about halfway through my program, focusing on positive behavior intervention and supports in secondary urban settings.
No big deal.
I adjunct as well. Yeah, just doing all the things. I adjunct as well for the Masters of Education classes at a university here in the city too, and have some pretty significant professional pursuits, which might find its way into our conversation as well.
Love that.
as we balance the personal and professional goals as well as the caretaking of my children.
Yeah. Yeah. You're a multifaceted person. We are here for it. I love that. We are definitely going to dive into all those sectors and how they overlap and interact. And this will be a fun conversation. I'm excited. So before we dive into kind of all the backstory, the prerequisite that I like to ask as kind of a disclaimer for all the guests that I bring on Failing Motherhood is to kind of take everybody off the pedestal and then bring in some reality that you don't have your whole life together and have it all figured out. So have you ever felt like you were failing parenting at all?
Every day. I felt that while I was even pregnant, before the babies even arrived.
Okay, you are one of us.
Yes, I am. Very much so.
So back up and just give us a quick recap. Who were you prior to becoming a parent?
Yes. Okay. So this is actually pretty integral, I think, into understanding my relationship with parenting now, because I would say that who I was before I was a parent and who I am after becoming a parent are pretty different in comparison, if not like borderline opposites. When I was younger, I had a lot of socialization that supported me becoming like a wife and a mother, and grew up wanting like a big family, was doing the teaching thing before I was even able to drive a car, teaching like summer camps and Sunday schools and all the things, and working in the daycare. And I really believed that having a large family was something that was really important to me. When I look back now, I recognize that there were like some commitments to codependency that I had not fully understood as an adult.
Understandably.
And my conception of what being a parent would be like and the relationship between a parent and a child was very rose colored glasses. I think that, maybe some people who don't have those types of relationships with their own parents believe maybe that they can recreate something that fulfills that need by having their own children. This is not my professional opinion. It's just my personal opinion as I look back and think about what I had hoped to get out of parenting when I initiated like becoming a parent. And in some ways, I was still growing. I didn't have the opportunity really ever in my life to live independently on my own until I was in my 30s. And that was really when I started knowing and understanding myself better as an individual entity. So at the time, I was thinking about becoming a parent, and then through a emergency placement for foster care from a family member, extended family member of mine that I'm not close with, it became clear that a child who is now my oldest needed a home or was going to have to go into like a group home situation or a foster care situation with another person that he was not related to. And so I became a parent actually without fully having time to process like what that means and making that choice. And I think maybe that is like probably the foundation of parenting right there. It's like, I'm just going to take my own little needs and I'm going to put them over to the side, and I'm going to make the decision that is best for this child. And wholeheartedly, like the decision was best for this child. So at 18 months, I was able to add my oldest to my home. And I navigated that pretty well. There's still a little bit of like some disconnect between what I thought I was going to be like and what it was,
Oh, I'm sure.
which was
Yeah.
mostly just like a lot of work constantly. And I did not have an understanding of yet like the language to describe what like autonomy and agency. I would just be like kind of giving up. Like, I want to go to the bathroom. I want to take a nap. Like, I don't want to go to the grocery store right now. Like, oh, I'll just eat ramen. Like, any decision I could make for myself was now through the lens of making that decision with someone else's needs as a priority, which was not super great for me at the time. And so I'm walking around with I was married at the time, and walking around with my oldest, and everyone would be like, "Oh, just wait till you have one of your own." And that just kind of wore on me, honestly. Having people say like, having people make presumptions about my fertility because I foster adopted a child actually was quite difficult. or people making assumptions about like functions of my body that they did not have access to knowledge relating to. And I very much did not appreciate a lot of those things. But, you hear something time and time and time again, and it does kind of wear on you, especially when you hear it from lots of different people. You love him so much, but that's just because you haven't had one of your own yet. The kind of coded language that situates families that are like non-biological as being less than or not as fulfilling as an experience. So eventually, I made that decision, and I worked on getting pregnant with my partner at the time, and it took a little bit of time. And I remember finally having the realization, I don't want to do this. I don't actually think I want to birth a child. And what do you know? A week later, I got the positive pregnancy test. Gosh darn it. Like that is exactly how that works. And
Oh,
when I told people that I was pregnant, of course they were excited. And then the layers of assumptions again. See, as soon as you stop worrying about it, that's when you get pregnant. I'm like, no, actually, me deciding to get pregnant now had no bearing on me being less satisfied with the way that my oldest child entered my family, or and his addition to my family was completely irrelevant to my own fertility. So that was unexpected, and I remember the feelings of like autonomy and agency just really even getting further buried in the pregnancy process. We watch those movies. Can't remember the movie right now where someone like sneezes and the baby comes out. And I just, oh, we have such a glow. And like, that was not me. I had every single negative pregnancy symptom you could have,
no.
whether it was carpal tunnel or hemorrhoid. It was terrible. I could barely sleep. I was sick all the time. And my own body just felt so alien. And, as a non binary person now, I recognize the ways in which I have the language to use dysphoria to describe the significant disconnect that occurred in my body, and almost like the intentional like dissociation. Like I'm going to pull back from my own body because it doesn't feel safe for me. And I'm going to reside more maybe in my mind. And that's not great because we don't want to treat ourselves like incubators, but I recognize that like it was very difficult to feel safe and at home in my body when I could not predict what had happened. And then my youngest came 7 weeks early.
Oh, no.
I had preeclampsia, pretty bad, actually.
Oh,
Pretty,
no.
pretty bad. And I had done this whole plan to do hypnobirthing and a medication-free delivery. And I had been meditating for like an hour to two a day in order to be fully ready for the delivery. Like I had invested so much. And like, well, I can't go back and okay, so at the time, my thinking was, I can't go back and become unpregnant. I am here now. Like I made this choice. Although we could have a separate conversation about like informed consent, because it's hard to make a choice when you have no idea what the outcomes of that choice are going to be or what it's going to look like.
Absolutely.
And I had missed all of this stage with my oldest, but regardless, I was like, I can't. I'm here now. I'm going to do it. So how can I move forward and kind of reclaim like some agency and some autonomy and how I decide to birth this child that I am growing to love before I even have him? And unfortunately, that was not what ended up happening. I had a pretty significant emergency delivery after a like 30-hour failed induction. I was absolutely miserable and horrifically in pain, and my body did not respond well. And eventually, baby didn't respond well, which is why I ended up having to have the emergency C-section, which was like the thing I didn't want. Like I'm just sobbing as they push me down, and they're treating this like, oh, it's normal. It's another day. And I'm just like sobbing in this wheelchair, getting pushed towards the operating room after being poked and prodded and cervical checked like way far often for what I felt comfortable with and all of the things in the body. And then after you have a baby after suffering preeclampsia, if your blood pressure is significantly high, they worry about whether or not you're going to have a seizure. So they put you on this medicine called magnesium. It makes you essentially like some magnesium supplement or whatever that makes you feel like you're drunk. And so they don't let you get out of bed. But baby was only 7 weeks old or 7 weeks early, can't breathe essentially on his own yet. So he's in the NICU. So it was almost like 36 hours before I was even allowed to see him after birthing him. And that just pulled up all the feelings as well as I am finally having like a sense of like he's out of my body. And yet like my body can't go to the bathroom and I can't barely move. I remember like trying to sit up. Oh gosh, I don't know if this is too graphic or not, but I just remember like trying to defecate and sobbing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we've all been there.
Like, what have I done? Like, what did I do? Why did I agree to do this? And but then you're looking at like a whole human, and you just, I mean, for me, anyways, I just was completely awestruck that I created this like whole other living thing with my body.
It really is wild.
And this whole other person is going to have this life because of me. And it brought up lots of feelings. So the jump from 1 to 2 was not easy.
How old was your oldest? Like 2 around this time?
Yeah. So he was about 2. And no, actually, he was 3 by this time. And I would say almost instantly from the time that I came home with my youngest, my oldest behavior started to change. And, coincidence or not, this is when we started having manifestations of his disabilities at this time. And because my youngest child was born prematurely, as well as some genetic factors that put him at significant risk for some disabilities. So both my children actually have disabilities that are a significant impact in our day to day, especially when it comes to like behavior management and having like a calm and peaceful home because they are, at one point I thought I could just give them Barbie dolls, or I could give them small babies. And like, if I just avoided like the fake guns and like the ninjas, maybe they wouldn't just like try to fight everything and destroy everything and be rambunctious. Like, I just disagree that boys are rambunctious by nature. Oh no, I'm eating my words now. They can do so much with so little, and they have energy for days. And like, there is no surface that they cannot find a way to catapult themselves off of, or no way that they can't, they have no tools and they can somehow find a way to destroy that toy if they really want to.
I believe it.
They're lively. And I was a kid who like wanted to stay with a book in my little like nook in my closet that I set up for myself and eat my snacks and organize my toys in a line. And I see none of myself in either of my children somehow. And it is a delicate balance with the responsibilities, because the reality is that, maybe other people have the ability to like give their children a task and then go complete, like for me, like my grad school homework. It's not possible in my household. My children, have to be supervised 100% of the time. Anything less than like 3 minutes, they could make decisions that result in harm to themselves or like harm to my furniture. So I struggled for a while, especially after starting grad school with, I am parenting until they go to sleep at 8:00. And then at 8:00, I reset the house. And that takes an hour or two because they are not quite yet there with being able to support doing that and being responsible in that way. We're clearly working on it. My oldest goes to therapy. Like, we have a medication plan or a treatment plan with some professionals that help improve and improve his coping skills with his disability and help him navigate the world. But those small gains, while celebrated, don't help me pick up 400 Legos off the kitchen floor. And I just remember nights where I would be like picking them up and just like on all fours, just sobbing. Like, I took some time to myself and I went and sat on the front porch for 20 minutes because I needed a breather. And then I come back in the house and it's just like destruction. And because I took that 20 minutes, now I have an hour and a half of work. And like, why did I take that 20 minutes? And kind of like the thinking spiral that can happen from that. So during that time resetting the house, and now that means the only free time that I can choose for myself comes at 10 or 11, which now means I'm making the choice to sacrifice sleep. Because I do want to meditate. I do want to read. I love to write. I want to watch Grey's Anatomy, darn it. Like I want to
Yeah.
sit in a bath with incense. Like I want to find ways to restore my peace, but for the longest time that was at the sacrifice of my sleep. So when my children were younger, I was maybe running for years on only maybe 4 hours of sleep a night.
Oh my gosh.
It was exhausting long term.
Yeah, to say the least. That's an understatement.
Yes. I am a little closer to like 6 now. It's going to get better as they get older. They get more independent all the time. But
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
what I thought parenting was going to be like and what it is are vastly different things. And your original question was about who I am now versus who I am then. And I did not have the space or the language to really understand myself. I was not in therapy when I was younger. Why? I don't know. But I did not, really work on my own self-improvement journey until I started seeing how much I was starting to resent parenting and just thinking like, what have I done with my life? Like, I'm going to be in this forever. I love them and I don't want them to go anywhere. And yet there is no escaping them because they're my children for the rest of my living life. How do I reconcile this? And that's when I started really focusing on like myself and understanding myself and maybe healing some of the ways that I needed to heal. And it's probably like the final linchpin that helped me begin to understand my sexuality as a queer person and my gender identity as a non-binary person, and how I was trying so hard to like make these fit into this mold of what conception I had of like parenting and motherhood would look like, what being a wife would look like at the time, and how I was getting very little fulfillment out of it in its construct at that time. And it was wearing me down. But doing that was super important. Going back to like, well, I didn't get to do that hypnobirth, but I do have the skills to meditate for long periods of time. And I haven't picked up a journal since I was a child. And the journal became ways for my parents to like read through them and find out what I was doing when they weren't around. And so I'd stopped journaling as a child, but I kind of reclaimed that for myself and started carving out space for, this many nights when the kids go to bed, like I'm going to go do a thing and I'm going to find who I am outside of this. And I ended up putting myself a lot into the professional sphere and creating lots of really accessing like power and autonomy in professional settings. And it brought me some new understandings. It helped me recognize that if I had been thinking and making decisions from my safest, most settled self, I would have not made the decision that I made to become a parent, truly. And the reasons that I chose to parent were because of like the thinking of like, I'll never be alone. Like someone will always love me. Like this is how I like a good relationship, a good marriage produces children. People are wondering what's happening because it's been a few years and there's no kids. Like I want to be good at it. That's really my like deepest thing, because I want to be really good at it. And getting to the place of recognizing that I was not good at it. I wasn't going to like get good at it. And when I say that, I don't mean good at parenting, but just good at becoming the embodied version of what my perception of good parenting looked like and how I was never going to get there. And it really changed my relationship with really parenting as a whole, but my relationship with both my children. Because somewhere along the way, I had this misconception that parenting was like, 70% rewarding and 30% difficult. But the reality is that parenting is like 98% difficult and maybe 2% rewarding, at least for me in my life right now. And it is not a healthy way of thinking to like just chase those rewarding moments as like the tiniest drops in the bucket to sustain you until the very next one. But like if anyone else in my life like raised their voice and screamed at me or cursed at me or called me names because I didn't cut their sandwich in the right way, like that person wouldn't occupy space in my life because my standards for my interactions with people in the world are so wholly different than the standards I have to have in my home because my role, because I'm not on an equal level playing field with my kids, my role is to teach them and to guide them. And even if that means that they struggle in ways that are hurtful for me, like that doesn't stop. I just have to learn how to negotiate it better and to use the coping skills of my therapist, the coping skills of my children's therapists, and do what we can to navigate it with the least, not the least amount of discomfort, but like discomfort in a way that is beneficial. But I sat with that for quite a long time. Why do I tolerate things in my personal life at home that I would literally never tolerate in relationships with other people? And how did that was a stage. I signed myself up to, like, I subjected myself to things that actively harm me because I'm not made of steel. I understand that, therefore, but if they say, F you, you're the worst parent ever. I cannot believe, that you would think this. Like, they can be sassy. They can be sassy. And that hurts over time, especially in the context of like, but I'm going to be a parent because I am really good at teaching and I'm going to be the best parent ever. And I've been doing things with children for 15 years. I've been teaching, classes at the library or the summer camp or the Sunday school since I was 12. Like, I'm going to rock this parenting thing. And then being confronted with the fact that like, oh no, nope, teaching 14 4-year-olds how to identify their letters is not even close to how difficult it is to put my youngest to bed. Like, oh no, it's not the same. It's not the same.
It's not the same at all. And that was actually to be my very next question. It was like, how do you compare teaching? Because I do feel like I end up working with a lot of families where there is a education background and that you come in with an even more skewed perception or preconception of what this is going to look like, because surely if I can do this with a bunch of other kids, I can do this with my own and it'll be fun. Like, this is like what I'm meant to do and meant to be. And instead it ends up being like keeping even more pressure on you that you should be able to do this and it shouldn't be this hard. And why is it so hard for you? And what does this mean about you as a person if you're failing at this? And it becomes this like mental gymnastics nightmare for what I see it being, teachers, social workers, therapists, counselors that then have their own children and really struggle.
Yeah. And I think that, when I leave school and I take my bag home and I get in my car, like, school is over. And teaching is absolutely performative. Like, you adopt a persona that's my professional self. That's not my full and total self when I'm at school.
You leave parts of you in the car and yep.
Absolutely. And then when I'm interacting, with children, I'm not saying what I think. I'm employing like, what are the evidence-based practices when I'm interacting with children very specifically in a way that is both an art and a science. And it is work and it is a performance.
And when they struggle, you do not take it personally.
Nope.
It does not enter a level of depth that your child can access.
No, definitely not. And so, I go home and then I'd find myself sitting in the car and not wanting to get out of the vehicle and being like, whew, I got to take some breaths. I got to ground myself. And I then would go back inside and almost like adopt another lens of performance. Now I'm going to be like the really calm and regulated person. And I'm going to, go through the routine and the structure. And every 15 minutes, like, we're switching our toys and here are your visual cues and here's your calendar. Like, these are the types of things I would bring into the home because that's what I knew worked at school. And, it can work if I committed to that fully, I do believe my home would be a more like peaceful, positive place and my kids would benefit. But the reality is that that is not reasonable. I cannot teach all day, come home, and then stay in that teaching persona down to the minute. Because when I'm teaching in the classroom, I'm thinking, I'm not in the classroom now, but when I was in the classroom, I'm thinking about like every 5 minutes. Like I know what's happening. I know what's next. I know what my plan is. I'm thinking 4 steps ahead to make sure that we end at the right time when the bell's going. Like that's a lot of cognitive load.
That's a lot of mental load.
Yeah, it's a lot of mental load. And so to come home and do that again, like that is a complete shutdown of my actual needs.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
You don't even pee at school. Like,
no.
You literally disconnect from that part of yourself. Yeah.
Yes. And I've gotten really good at that, honestly, which is a feat after birthing a child.
Just don't go on a trampoline.
Just don't go on a trampoline. Yes. Yes. Oh my. But no, that is a whole other difficulty. And that's in addition to like some of the compassion fatigue and some of the ways that teaching in general can leave you really emotionally depleted.
So burnt out. Then
you come home and you have to then adopt that, performance once more and navigate that until they go to sleep. And that has been difficult. Ultimately I've had to give myself space to be like, it's 400 Legos, it's 400 Legos. And maybe those 400 Legos don't need to be picked up today. Maybe they can pick them up in small chunks over the next like 2 days. Like maybe things don't have to be perfect. Maybe they're just eating a bag of grapes that they got themselves out of the refrigerator for their lunch.
Yeah.
And we'll call it a picnic.
The bar goes a little bit lower each day when you make peace with that reality. Yes.
Yes. Because I have to balance my kids' needs because they depend on me. And I see the outcomes of the choices I make with my kids like in real time. And I recognize long term the impact that those choices have on them. And I take that responsibility of parenting very seriously. But, I also have to show them what it looks like to have healthy boundaries, teach them that other people's needs are important, that there are emotions that they can provoke with their behaviors that matter, that I am more than just a parent. And sometimes that's a little bit stressful. I remember or even maybe difficult to understand is probably the better word than stressful. I remember just like maybe even 2 months ago, my mom said something like, I just don't know where you got this idea that you need to have nights off or that you should get breaks. I never had a break. And it hurt just a tiny bit, because that kind of stuff reinforces that you're not a good parent for prioritizing your own needs. But really, in my processing after that, I recognize that, generationally, we are probably one of the first generations that have space in society to say, I do need breaks. And we got a long ways to go. But that was probably not something that my mom could have said.
No.
30 years ago, or that she had ever seen anyone else say, or that her parent got to see. And when I think about that, like long term, I realize like I'm in my era right now. Like here I am as a parent, and I have to navigate a lot of things that are really difficult. It is difficult parenting children with disabilities. It is difficult parenting children when you live alone. It is very difficult raising 2 children who have queer parents. To be frank, that is a whole other topic that we could go down. That very first time that my son was like, why do people think we're weird? Like, why do they say mean things? Why did that person yell at us? I wish I could tell you that I get to navigate life as a queer person and as a non-binary person in social spaces without ever receiving harm, but that is just not the reality. That is not the reality. And my children have had to witness this. And so in addition to all of that, just finding ways to fit all the pieces together. And it's not going to be a puzzle that makes a masterpiece that anyone else is going to recognize. But it is like a work that I am proud of, because I do feel like, it's so many layers. We can talk for hours about
I know. There's so much to talk about. I have all the questions. Here's the deal. If your child is sensitive and smart, yet loses it, is clingy, or aggressive with you at home, they can go 0 to 60 over the smallest things, like when they just don't get their way, nothing changes their mind, and they can't seem to get over it, and you know what you're doing isn't working, and siblings are starting to suffer. You could go to therapy yourself and take your child to therapy and follow all the experts and ask your family and friends for advice and take a course and set up a calm down corner and read all the parenting books and still feel defeated. It's time. It's time to learn the missing pieces of invaluable insight about their temperament that unlocks compassion in you and understanding of how to work with the way they're wired. It's time to communicate in new ways, like a hostage negotiator, to get through to them and cultivate cooperation with confidence. And it's time to eliminate the behaviors that are working to gain control and attention at their root, rather than playing whack-a-mole. Calm and Confident, the masterclass, is for you. There, you will master the kind and firm approach your strong-willed child needs without crushing their spirit or walking on eggshells. In this free training, I share the 4 critical kind and firm scripts that unlock cooperation in every situation, how to eliminate behaviors at their root, and the path to solidifying the open and honest relationship that you want to have with your child down the road. So go to parentingwholeheartedly.com/confident to access this exclusive on-demand training immediately. That's parentingwholeheartedly.com/confident. That link will be in the show notes. So let's go down that path of, first question and then second question. First question, circling back to informed consent. Do you think that when, let's say, even in the best case scenario, parents are deciding to become parents, that it is an informed, consensual choice, that they understand all the ramifications of the decision they're making?
I don't think it's possible, honestly. And maybe the gap for some people's perception and reality are actually quite slim. I mean, based on my social media feed, it would seem like some people are really killing it.
Yeah.
And maybe that gap is really small, but I don't think there's any way to truly know. And if you really did, that wouldn't also be honoring your children's like unique individual selves. They are going to grow in who they grow into, and they're going to struggle in the ways that they struggle. And honestly, they're never going to stop struggling in some way because that's part of life. It just changes to different types of struggles as they get older. And they're whole people. I remind myself all the time, like they are whole people who get to experience the world in the way that they do. And I'm just kind of like one stop on their journey. But there's no way to predict like what a child is going to be like with any multidimensionality that reflects who they are as whole people. And I think some of this could get better with conversations like the one we're having.
Exactly.
You know, I remember the very first time I told someone I absolutely hated motherhood and I will never get pregnant again and no one could ever pay me enough money to do this process again. I hated it. And I honestly, I had a little bit of postpartum, and that did include some thoughts of wanting to harm myself, which I was able to rectify with support of my medical professionals. But like, I almost mentally and physically did not survive this. I will not do this again. And the very first time I said that out loud in front of a person, they started to cry and revealed that they had had some infertility issues, and they would give, quote, anything to have what I had. And I remember just walking away from that conversation being like, I don't know. I don't know how to navigate these spaces with moms who feel like they're doing well, or other non-binary parents who feel, really attached to this, because I feel so disconnected. And like, where is my community? But luckily that one experience didn't keep me from repeating it, because the further I got into parenting, the more I said, if I had had any reflection of what this looked like in my younger years, I would have been able to make a better decision. If any single person had told me that it was so hard, maybe I wouldn't have listened, but I don't recollect hearing anything like that. In the same way that like I didn't know any non-binary people as a child, I didn't know any as a teenager. I had very few representations in the ways that I was raised that allowed me to interact with queer individuals, let alone queer parents. So I'm really, I'm really open now to talking about this, not because I am trying to dissuade people from making choices to fulfill their lives, nor do I think that like being a parent is not fulfilling in some way that I would recommend to other people, but just with this like idea that we have this archetype of what parenting is like, and we're all kind of like ascribing to it. And until we have more representations and conversations and just more reality to what this looks like, I don't know that we're ever going to have a more complete picture that allows people to be informed when they consent to it.
So well said. So well said. And that was where we had originally connected for, this topic. And I felt like it was very important to represent on Failing Motherhood, because if you are feeling that prevailing feeling of, I don't want to screw this up, and I do feel like I'm failing at it, and I feel like I'm the only one, I know that there are listeners out there that you just gave words that they didn't have yet to describe how they have felt, and they have been too scared to say them out loud because they're afraid of offending someone who wants what they have, or afraid of, saying that they don't want what they had so desperately wanted before, or that they don't love their kids because for some reason those two things can't exist at the same time, that we don't enjoy motherhood. That means that it negates our love for our kids, or vice versa. Like, absolutely not. Was not what we were saying at all. And until we can allow for the nuance and the complicated conversation that brings up all of the emotions that paint the picture that it is way more complex than that, can we actually validate and hold space for the dichotomy that both of those things can be true and can exist in someone's life experience and be true and be very much how they feel and how their experience has been. And there's a space for that. And the more people that can hear those words and that can feel validated and maybe even have that perspective earlier and sooner, the better. We're not on a campaign to say nobody become parents. It's just being able to reach those that feel so isolated, so alone, and so hard on themselves for feeling that way as well, that we're just trying to shed light on.
Absolutely. I can sit here on this podcast and tell you right now that if I could go back in time, I wouldn't be a parent. And some of those things are hard to say because I'm not going to ascribe to the thinking that like, if I wasn't a parent, my children wouldn't exist. Like, I could go down that rabbit hole and spiral a bit. But if I'm just thinking in isolation in a vacuum about myself solely, I would not do it. But even though I can't go back and change anything, this is a tenet to life in general. You can't go back and change anything. What I can do now is try to find a balance between who I am as a person and make space for all the feelings. And none of that changes the fact that I desperately love my children. And I can feel burdened by them quite frequently, actually, and yet still love them immensely. And if I didn't have that, I don't know how I would manage to like survive this choice. I think that going through this experience has helped me learn a lot and empathize a lot with people who have made the decision to give up their children to other homes because they didn't feel like they could provide for them. People who have been like forced to deliver a child or maintain a pregnancy they did not want. I'm not making a comment really on the validity of any of those choices, but I can say that I have a more complete understanding of why people have resistance. And I know I can't be the only person, as evidenced by this podcast. I can't be the only person who feels this way. And it makes me sit in my big, deep feelings when I think about how many AFAB people throughout time have felt this and still did it every single day and had no choice. And how grateful I am that we have choices, that I know people who have decided to be child free and are living healthy and fulfilled lives according to them or their goals and their values. And I know people who have, families of 10 and are living in the way that is according to their values and fulfillment. and that I can reside here and there's space for me too. There's space for me as a person who has a difficult relationship, or maybe I should just say a complicated relationship with parenting.
It's the little Facebook thing where it used to say it's complicated.
Complicated. It's complicated, this relationship. And I don't expect that it's ever going to become uncomplicated because we as humans are complicated. But there's also space for me, as a queer parent and as a non-binary parent.
Yes. And you do need more than love to parent.
Oh, yes.
I think that simplistic ideal of like, the love just takes over and then it's all natural, you'll know what to do when the time is right. And that there's still even a stigma around enlisting in support to help you parent. That's wild to me that you're just supposed to come like predetermined and predestined to know everything you need to know about staying calm and stress management and clear communication and holding boundaries and all these things. Nobody has that. What are we doing? Why do we think that that's just something that everybody has for you? So you're a bad person for needing help. No, that's not how this works.
No, I suspect in communities that have cultures that have more multi-generational homes, perhaps there wouldn't be such a sense of isolation, or communities that are closer knit. I think about like my cul-de-sac upbringing. Like I bet my parents connected in some ways with other parents on that cul-de-sac, but that interconnectedness is not necessarily the same in our like social landscape now. It's not the same, for my children and my experiences.
We're definitely moving away from it, if anything.
Yeah, and we're moving away from it. And even if over wine night, someone would have said something, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would have been given like actionable things. And I think it takes an intense amount of bravery to say, and it feels like it's putting your needs first, but really you're also prioritizing your kids' needs, because an unhealthy, unhappy parent cannot raise healthy, happy kids.
Bingo.
And there's an interconnectedness there, but it takes some bravery to say, like, I need help. This is not working. This is not what I thought it would be. And I'm in a book club. I think everyone should join a book club. And I have been in this book club for 3 years, and the other individuals in this book club are all maybe like that suburban mom archetype. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean it to highlight the fact that like our experiences are quite different, and that there was a meeting that we had over a book about a year ago. And I remember just breaking down in tears and being like, this isn't good. I don't like this. I can't do this. I'm struggling. A year ago, I had a pretty bad peak of like, this is really hard for me. And I remember at first them being like, it's okay. It gets better. They'll get older. They'll grow out of it. And I remember just saying like, no, it's not going to get better. Like, it's not going to get better because I'm doing this for life. And I don't see, there's no, I feel so trapped by the fact that I have to navigate this significant stress every single day. And it's making me feel all these kinds of ways. And I just kind of push harder. And in that like meeting, they all started crying and they all started saying like that they struggle too, and that they understand my struggle. And it's almost like we have to say the words, but we have to be brave enough to keep saying them.
Yes.
Because sometimes people need to hear them more than once. And I think that for a lot of people who are socialized to become parents, become mothers specifically, we have been taught a lot of caretaking. And sometimes when someone says this is hard, our first reaction is to say like, oh, let me offer this, or let me validate that it's going to get better. And let me try to caretake for you in the social conversation. It's like, I don't need you to help me out of it. Well, I do a little bit, but I don't need that right now. I need you to tell me you're down here with me in it.
Yes.
Because I need to know that I'm not alone. And then, none of us are crawling out of, not to use a whole depiction metaphor, but we're not like crawling out of this well of struggle in isolation, that we're like doing it together. We are lifting each other up, that we are finding ways to like have reprieves, that I can send a message and say, it was a rough week and I could drink a glass of wine with you for an hour tonight after the kids go to sleep if you're free. Like, do you have time for like a FaceTime? Like, I need to have a moment before I transition to those dishes, or I need to just leave the dishes in place of going out and finding community. But that has been the most helpful thing, is understanding and knowing myself more, giving myself more grace, making space to have those what appears to be conflicting feelings, rewriting that narrative. If I ever have in my mind, like, I'm a bad parent, nope, I am the best parent that I can be. And my children are blessed to have me as a parent. Truly, truly, they are blessed. And I get to treat them with respect, and I get to teach them things that they would not learn otherwise, because who I am as a parent or who I am as a person, truly, beyond just as a parent, is a unique tangle of so many things that they'll never be able to unwind to fully understand me before my life is over. And every person is that way. Every person is so multifaceted. And maybe someone else could step in and do the actions of parenting, but no one can step in and be the same parent you can, because who you are is so unique, and the way you see the world and the way you communicate and your values, who you are is amazing, and no one could replace you. So yes, I am a great parent.
I love
He
that.
hates it some days, but I am a great parent.
You have read my mind this whole interview. Like, I keep thinking something, and then you pick it up on ESP, and then you start addressing it before you even ask it. But you already just asked the last question I ask every guest, which is, how are you the parent your kids need? And summed it up so eloquently. I love it. And then it's so true and valid, though, because we are such complex people that, like, our kids only get to see sometimes a glimmer of and one side of us at any one given time. And it's going to be so much fun to get to know each other at deeper and deeper levels as they get older, which is really cool. And they are absolutely blessed to have you. And the fact that you can continue that development on yourself and not have guilt for your, professional endeavors, and to be able to continue to pour into yourself so that you are fuller, and that pours over to them, only enriches and benefits them. The more you diminish yourself does not benefit your kids. It's the opposite. The more you pour into yourself, the more you have to give, the more that you're able to accept them in their full experience of their individuality as well. And I love that for your whole family. But I can't let you go yet, because I feel like we've still only like scratched the surface. So
I know.
for like 5 more minutes, I wanted to ask you about, reckoning with the role and word and term of like being a mother.
Yes.
How have you kind of reckoned with that, and what does that look like now? Just sum up your whole journey.
Yes. No, is it 5 minutes? Whew, no,
Yeah,
I will
I
do
know.
my best. But I also think it's important, because we haven't talked about this. The things that I'm able to tell you now today about understanding myself as a mother or as a parent is because of my connections to other people who are also parents, but specifically other people who are also queer parents, other people who are also non-binary, and having all of that, help frame my own understanding of myself. And not every queer parent, not every non-binary parent has that connection to community. And community is so important. I don't feel strong ties to the word mother. I don't consider myself a mother. For me, when I think back to what it means to be a mother, I think back to those like caretaking, nurturing behaviors, and these things that are described as like wholly feminine. And in my non-binary identity, I still have all of those things, but they don't reflect to me as inherently feminine and solely specific to femininity. And I don't feel a strong call to like Mother's Day and the like. Although I appreciate the space set aside to celebrate parents in that way. I consider myself a parent. I usually use the phrase parent. I let my children choose what they want to call me. And if they call me mom, like, I don't force them to call me anything other than what they want to, because their expression of affections to me should be genuine. So they do call me that sometimes. Sometimes they call me dad. Again, I don't correct them. I don't know that everyone understands it. I'm sure it's just a reflection of the ways in which I fulfilled different roles in their life, because I want them to see me as, steadfast and consistent and authoritative and powerful, and all of the things that we we as society in the broader term tend to ascribe to masculinity, which is honestly also kind of a farce because you can do all of those things and still be holy woman. But from a binary stereotype, they can see me as both. They can see me as both, and they rectify, the different parts of me that are both. And sometimes they understand it and sometimes they don't. And I answer their questions in a way that's curious. I expect that they will understand it more as they get older. I feel very strongly about not like sitting them down and having this big conversation. I am non-binary and here's what that means. And you will only call me this. I look at it more as I continue to know and understand myself and grow and change and express myself in different ways, like they are just responsive to what they see. And if they ask me a curious question, they will, and I'll answer it. And if someone uses they, them in front of me, maybe they'll use they, them too. Maybe they will for just a little bit and go back to she, her. Again, I don't police their language because their relationship with language is different than it is in my life, where I can be more intentional about the language that I use and how I communicate to others with a precision that fully represents, hopefully, the things I want to communicate. And so I guess I just make space. It's hard some days. There is like Mother's Day, Father's Day is difficult. I remember, I will not speak to which school district this was, but I went to go enroll my kids, my oldest in kindergarten. And I remember getting a form that I had to fill out that said mother and father. And I called once I got home and read the forms and said, like, I need you to send me other forms because my children have two moms. And I am not going to decide which one of us gets put in the father line. I would like a different form, please. And I just remember the person who answered the phone being like, we don't do that here. And I just felt so invalidated as a parent because that's the part I think that's difficult for me. I know I'm coming up on the 5 minutes, but I think that is difficult for me is reconciling how my children view me is not how the world views me. My children get to see me as, their champion and the person who cares for them and the person who loves them and the person who teaches them and like all the roles I get to fulfill. But a lot of those roles are not, validated or recognized or made space for by others. And then having my children ask me questions that I don't have the answers to for why the world works the way that it does. And why I remember last year, I have two friends that are lesbians and parents, and someone like lit their flag on fire in front of their house. And I remember my son overheard me talking about it with someone, and he was just like, why? What's wrong with us? Why would anyone do that? And I think that that's probably the hard part. Being a non-binary parent, being a queer parent, I get to carve space out for the way that I want to live the world and the way that I want to experience the world. And part of being non-binary is saying, like, no, I'm actively deconstructing what is expected of me, and I am creating an authentic path for myself. And I am not allowing these social influences to tell me how I should live or tell me that I should behave in a certain way or identify in a certain way. And so I can navigate that well. And in my home, I can navigate that well being a word I'm kind of using liberally, but I can navigate it as I navigate it, and I can carve out what it means to be a non-binary parent with my children because my parenting relationship is with them. But the things that happen outside my home, the things that my children have to experience sometimes or hear about, the things that I see occurring to other people in my community, that's what makes it difficult.
For sure. Yeah.
We just all need to be a little kinder to each other.
Yes. For the love.
For the love.
Yes. And that's what I appreciate the opportunity to just hear your story, because I think that the more stories we hear, the more insight and perspective we have into just how different everyone is and how complex humanity is, and just how much we can learn from each other when we have the words for things that we haven't firsthand experienced. And it just takes that that proximity to your story allows us to feel much more like we understand something we didn't understand as much an hour ago. So thank you for your transparency, honesty, vulnerability, willingness to be the person who says the things that other people are afraid to admit, because that is a needed role in this parenting space. And we can only get better and better at being braver and saying those things so that we don't feel so alone and can support each other and find that community we so need. So thank you, Holly, for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. And thank you for creating a platform for people to realize or remember that they're not alone.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Failing Motherhood. Your kids are so lucky to have you. If you loved this episode, take a screenshot right now and share it in your Instagram stories and tag me. If you're loving the podcast, be sure that you've subscribed and leave a review so we can help more moms know that they are not alone if they feel like they're failing motherhood on a daily basis. And if you're ready to transform your relationship with your strong-willed child and invest in the support you need to make it happen, schedule your free consultation using the link in the show notes. I can't wait to meet you. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.